You're very welcome, Ruth, Meehan, Jean Pasley, Gemma-Leah, Devereux, and Siobhán Cullen. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been quite a journey for the film. And I'd just like to start off by talking a bit let's go back before The Bright Side. Ruth, you and Jean were looking to work on something, I believe, for the Catalyst program before you kind of happened upon Anne's book. But what was your working relationship, the two of you, before that? Had you worked together before? Were you looking to work on something for a while? How did that come about?
Is this me or you, Ruth?
But you go first.
You go, Jean.
Yeah.
I go first? Okay. In the airport, in Dublin airport, and read it on the journey. And she said, you have to read this book. We really should make a film of this. So I bought the book, and just as Ruth started working on the screenplay.
That's amazing. You picked it up at the airport, just by happenstance, Ruth, or?
I was. It was a year after I lost my sister to cancer. Out, and I had been in college with Anne many months ago, and I just was communication skill set, because she was talking about her own experience, but she just seemed to be able to create a new lens on an experience that I had gone through, obviously very differently, but so many of us have experienced cancer and all that goes with that. And yeah, so I contacted Jean. Jean and I had actually been looking for something to work on, and I just thought, well, look, this character, is an amazing proposition. Somebody who is really struggling with being here, and her main desire is to really avoid the pain of being alive. And a diagnosis of cancer is actually something that could provide a way out. So that was our starting point, and we got together with Anne and talked about that. And she was really keen for us to take the book and go in a direction to build a story around the character. So that's how it started. Yeah.
I read a quote from the book, and I think it was in an interview with you, Ruth, about how she had said she had been sexually promiscuous but emotionally celibate for a long time, which kind of is a very interesting thing at the starting point of Kate's journey as well. Obviously, you've changed quite a bit from Anne's book, obviously going forward, a lot of the characters. Before that, did Anne stay involved through this process, or?
Jean, you tell us.
Well, initially, we sat down and we were very aware of the complexity of the book and the difficulties of making it into a film. It's an autobiography, so most of the content is the internal thoughts of Anne, and it was going to be quite a challenge to externalize those thoughts. So to that end, we invented the women and Andy. I don't think Andy is not in the book. No, none of the women are in the book. So that's how we began. As soon as we had established the characters, it wasn't that difficult a job to take the content, the prose, and turn it into dialogue and events in the book. And Anne stayed involved mostly for the stand-up pieces, I think. And we would always run it by Anne just to make sure she was happy with how we were treating her material.
Very good. And the stand-up pieces, and I'll come to that when I'm talking to Gemma-Leah in a moment, are incredibly authentic as well. How was the development process? You got producer Tony Deegan on board. When did he come into the picture? Ruth.
Yeah, when we initially wrote a very quick draft, it was actually for Catalyst, the Screen Ireland's Catalyst scheme, which it wasn't successful in, but Rory Gilmartin at the time said, no, we actually think there's something here. So they actually gave us development money. And then after him, Leslie McKim continued that support. So we were starting just the two of us, and then well, basically I had worked with Tony Deegan before, and Tony, and I talked to Tony about it, and he loved the script as well, and actually Paul Donovan was exec producer established a company, Playground Pictures, to make the film with the support of Screen Ireland, and we used the model, the BAI RTE 481 and Screen Ireland. So it was the budget reflected that model really. But it did give us just a very straightforward development process in one hand, because although it took time to write the script and get it ready, it was supported from the start. So which was great.
That's fantastic to hear that there was that support. Just on the development process as well, I'm just curious how, what changes can happen as you're going through. And as I was mentioning before we started talking, like I adore the complexity of, so the emotional arc Kate goes through, and it's quite complex in a lot of ways, actually. I'm just wondering how you kind of worked out a lot of those things. I know a lot of people, you start one way and then kind of show to people and it changes and so forth. Jean, maybe you could talk about your relationship. Did you write together, or did you go back and forth on things?
No, we mostly wrote together in one house or another. Yeah, we sat down most of the time we were together on it. We had a lot of fun and a lot of heartbreak, because it was really challenging. I remember when we first went into Screen Ireland to talk to Rory about it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a character who's, through her illness, she has a serious, probably life-threatening illness, and she's depressed, suicidal, and how is she going to overcome her ingrained lack of self-worth and fear of intimacy? And this is supposed to be a light-hearted comedy. No, I don't think so. I was thinking Rory's, but he understood. He understood what we were trying to do. We went through many drafts, trying to get the balance right, I suppose, because of the complexity of the character. There aren't many characters with a need like Kate's. I mean, effectively, she wants to die. She's struggling with suicidal ideology. And as a need or as a goal in a feature film, that's not very attractive to financiers. So we had to make it attractive. We had to spin it in such a way that it was okay to begin like that. But that was really difficult. That was very hard.
It's very atypical in that, if you can be very atypical, that like normally your character has these goals and needs you want, and then an obstacle put in front of them.
Yes.
And it's almost like she wants to die, and then this potential death is put in front of her, and the opposite happens.
Yes. Normally they want to live, and then everywhere they go, they almost die. This time she was wanting to die, but all the obstacles in her way were efforts by people to keep her alive, which she was struggling against. So it was a very unusual structure to navigate through the film.
And for Kate, before we get onto Gemma-Leah and Siobhán here now, I suppose, and we'll talk about Tracy as well in a moment, who's another excellent character. But like the character of Kate, as you mentioned, there is very complex and difficult. And I'm just wondering, like, once you kind of had a sense of Kate and who she was, like, how did you go about casting that? Or like, did you have a particular type of person you're looking for, or what was the process involved, Ruth?
Well, as Jean said, like one of the things that I kept foremost in my mind, I know Jean and I did when we were developing it, and I continued it, is authenticity, because I was really aware that we were dealing with a subject matter that was super sensitive, and that always remained the number one thing, even that maybe because there's a lot of irreverence and the humor, the reverence, it does give it a freshness, but not, hopefully not at the expense of real authentic feeling. And we were always thinking, what does it take genuinely for this character find connect to wanting to be alive again? And like that was always there in the back, and myself and Gemma-Leah would have, and all of the shooting, all of the editing, all of the writing, everything is like, is this believable? Is this real for this character? So when we went to cast, I mean, as Gemma-Leah knows, I had an entirely different idea of what Kate would be. But I always think that a really powerful creative project, or a film being one, has its own pulse, and your job really as a creator or co-creator, because that's literally what you are in film, is to be able to listen to that. Now, there's as many different ways to direct as there are people, so it's not a right or wrong way. It's just, for me, like an entity to itself. And when I saw Gemma-Leah, she doesn't like me saying this because she always thinks I took forever to tell her that she was cast, but actually, I immediately thought, now I can make the film. It was an immediate visceral reaction, which, and I showed it to Jean and Anne, and they, like, you know, the film kept surprising me in all sorts of ways. So it wasn't a case of me, and anyway, we didn't, even if I wanted to, didn't have the resources to go and batter reality into a minute detail of what I thought this film needed to be. It was much more of a custodian of the pulse, is the way I would see it, and casting it all across the board, from Gemma-Leah to Siobhán to like, oh, Barbara, Devereux, Tom, you know, Karen, Kevin, Karen, everybody felt like they just were part of this piece that is the bright side that we were bringing in really. So that was really, and Amy Rowan, who cast it with myself and Tony, I think had the same sensibilities. So it's like a hot. It's not a fail, succeed barometer. It's a what's right for this pulse of this one. And Gemma-Leah immediately jumped out at me, and I actually never looked any other way after that.
That's fabulous, and I've written down the phrase "custodian of the pulse" because that's something that I think that's beautiful and very poetic, actually. But that's something that came up a lot even yesterday when we were talking to Christine Malloy and Joe Lawler behind Rose Plays Julie, and they were saying as well, like, the ideas they had. Then the cast came in, and a lot of that kind of changed for the better, and it was just like, you know, having that, creating space where that can happen and trusting that the pulse will remain is really important. Gemma-Leah and Siobhán, I'm going to come to you guys now. Just to follow up on that, Gemma-Leah, with you at the start. So it was a tape that went in first. So how did the project come your way in the first place? Were you sent the script, or was it just an audition call?
Yeah, no, I was sent the script, which I just fell in love with. I thought the script was, I mean, they wrote it so brilliantly. And especially with a character like that and a lead like that, which is going to challenge you in every single way, which is what Kate did, every single way. It was something I was like, as soon as I read it, I was like, I have to do this part. I have to do this part. So I auditioned for it and sent it in, and I was just very gung-ho about it. And then I went in and met Ruth, and I met Tony, and we all had a meeting. And then first I met Ruth actually, and then we had a big meeting about it, and I spent ages with you actually. And then I had a meeting again, but anyway, it was just dragging on. And I think by the third meeting or fourth meeting or something, I was very much to my agent. Why am I like, I'm the only person who can play Kate. I have to play Kate. I just knew it was just such a beautiful script. And I really knew it would push me in every single way I wanted to go. So that's how it went. And then, when I finally met then Tony and Ruth in the last meeting, which was the one that I was giving out about to my agent, I went in and they offered me the role right there. And then I started crying, actually, because I just really wanted the role so much. Kate's just such a brilliant character to play. I mean, yeah, just fantastic. So
she is, and we've already talked about like how rich she is, but I can see when we come back to this moment, like, even having read the script or watching the film, the challenge as a lead actress that would present must have been very exciting, but quite intimidating as well.
So exciting. And it's actually, to be honest, it's the things that, I mean, I always want to be scared. I always want to be scared when I'm doing work, and I want to be pushing myself, whether that be, shaving my head, or let's say losing loads of weight, or, getting properly into the skin of a character. And to me, you just don't read them very much. And to even, to be able to audition for, to even to get it in front of you, you just never read them. You really don't. And so yeah, it was intimidating. I don't know though, it felt really right. Like, I just knew I was ready to do it. I don't know what it is, but I have it in there. And I was like, and I related so much to Kate. There was so much about Kate that I related to. She's just so lost, and there was just so much. So just, yeah, I had to try and grab it, but yeah, with both hands. I think I
Well, you did a terrific job with it, and so did Siobhán, who I'm going to come to now, playing Tracy. Siobhán?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth and Jean, but I think I was sent the scenes, and it was the scene that I taped was the scene with myself and it happens only a handful of times, or it has only happened a handful of times, I think, since in my career, where you just click with the script. You don't need to really even spend a whole lot of time learning the lines. It just feels natural, it feels right. And yeah, so I think I just taped, and then the offer came through with the rest of the script. So that's kind of, yeah, how it came my way. But similar to Gemma-Leah, it was one of those ones that I was like, I really want this, or I feel like if I don't get it, I know what I would do with Tracy, and if that's not what they want, that's absolutely fine. I would happy to part ways. But it was one of those ones that I felt so strongly about, who I thought Tracy was. So I'm just glad that they agreed with my sort of interpretation of her.
Well, I remember getting the tape, Siobhán, when and being like, again, like with Gemma-Leah, it's such a, from a director's point of view, it's such a relief. I mean, I know actors must feel all the time that they're on the spot and they're being judged, and they, but as a director, you have nothing until you have it. And when you see it, it's like, oh, thank God, And I remember seeing that tape you did, and I was like, it was the same thing. It was like, phew, and then you stop worrying, because you know that. And again, it's funny, because lots of people might read something and they will all bring something, it's not a right or good or bad. It's like, okay, like for this film and this feeling, this is the person. And when you have that, you kind of need 100% gut feeling of that. And I think it's very frightening as a director when you don't have that, because if you don't have that, you actually don't have anything. So it's so binary. It's like, it's you have it or you don't have it. And it's such a, like, I remember the moment, and Tony like actually sent me the tape and said, oh my God, like, look at Siobhán. And I was going, oh my God. So it was, again, that really, I mean, casting is the most terrifying part of, well, writing's the hardest and casting is the most frightening, because, I mean, who has it said, like, if you have a good script well written and you've cast it well, really, you've so much.
What more can you do? Yeah. And Jean, just on that, like what Ruth was saying there, like as a director, but like as the having written it with her, how did you feel when you saw Gemma-Leah and Siobhán in like the roles of those two characters who have such an important relationship and arc?
Oh, I thought they were wonderful. I was pretty blown away by it. But everybody has their own idea of what the character should be, or what they should look like, or how they should sound. But no, I was absolutely delighted with how it all worked out. Yeah, it's wonderful when you first see your script, actors acting your lines. It is a wonderful moment. It becomes real then, because until there's flesh and blood on the words.
You're saying there as well, like it must be thrilling, especially as their relationship is so central to it. Gemma-Leah and Siobhán, did you have a chemistry test or anything like that? Because the two of you were just brilliant, and the arc the two of you have is fantastic. That scene Siobhán mentioned about the two of you sitting down smoking the joint next to the boat is it's like a wonderful kind of friendship moment. How did the two of you kind of, I suppose, work on that chemistry together, or was that something instant? Gemma-Leah, I'll start with you.
I'm going to speak for myself, but I think it was very instant, to be honest. We never chemistry tested. I got cast, I've never met Siobhán before, and there was something just about, I don't know, just again, it's very much like what Ruth says, it just felt right. We just got on very well, and together, obviously you're supposed to, it's like very funny that you're saying a rom-com there, by the way, because it's so true. They kind of do meet very early on, and they they don't get on, they do, and there's such a, Tracy is so important to Kate's journey. They're both so important to each other, without their kind of yin and yang, they need each other in a weird way. But yeah, I don't know about you, Siobhán, but I think
I find it really difficult. No, I totally agree. But no, luckily, yeah, we did. We just hit it off. But yeah, because Ruth, I always would describe the relationship, well, particularly for I suppose when you were talking to me about Tracy, that it's a love story at the end of the day, and the way that they impact each other's lives. It's like, as you said, like a rom-com. But yeah, no, we just kind of we just hit it off, and luckily that chemistry was there, and there weren't any massive blowouts or fights or
lived happily ever after.
And also Tracy was designed to break Kate's heart. You know, like I think of all, without that relationship, the film wouldn't have worked. And actually, I remember Emer Markey in Screen Ireland, not long before we shot, myself and Jean had written it, so that scene at the lake was kind of resolved. They had a fight and resolved. And Emer Markey was saying, should it really be resolved there? And as a result of that, we rewrote the scene in the boat, because suddenly it was like, okay, there has to be a revelation of intimacy that gets thrown back, that is so horrendous. Like when we were writing that scene, it was like, oh my God, she can't say those things. But actually you have to, it's so awful. And yet the feeling it creates this really powerful connection between them. And then the deathbed scene propels her to the sea. And it's like bump, bump, bump. So in a funny way, that relationship is like, that's why I always said it was a love story, because Tracy breaks Kate's heart open, and without that, the film doesn't work at that level. It works on another level. But without that, I don't think you would ever believe Kate's character could surrender to life, which is what's happening at the end in the sea. I don't think she could without that trauma of the relationship, the love that she actually unbeknownst to herself connected. Anyway.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. She broke her heart open. I love that. That's really, really, it's exactly what happens. And it's interesting as well, because when they meet first, it's quite antagonistic. And I think their second meeting, Tracy has that great, they're like, who's she? And she's like, oh, she's big in Leitrim. Kind of throwaway one. That relationship I think is really strong, but they're both quite funny characters as well. Like obviously Kate's character has the stand-up thing, and I just want to talk to Gemma-Leah a little bit about that, because it feels incredibly authentic. All the stand-up scenes. Did you have any experience with that, or something you had to work very hard on?
I swear to God, honestly, I'm terrified of stand-up. It's so funny. There's so many things I will do as an actor. Like there's something about stand-up. To me, and it's so funny as well, because it's written for me. I learn it. People are paid to laugh because they're supporting artists. And I still was terrified. We did it for a whole day. Mark Kelly made the set look amazing, and they were there by the end. They were still laughing at me. Fair play to them. But yeah, I find it quite tough. They're quite big as well. They're quite big. It's quite big things, and you're trying to get a lot into them. But I think I just looked at a lot of stand-up. There was a lot of research in this role in general. You've got the stand-up, and you've got a whole world of cancer and a whole mental health aspect going on. There was a lot of things to research. But I did enjoy doing stand-up. I did because it scared me, and I love being scared. So I suppose yes. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I just couldn't do it in real life like at all. God, yeah.
I don't know how anyone does, but like it felt like a good stand-up I'd see around Dublin or Galway or Cork or something like.
Thank you so much.
In the writing and the performance,
It's in the writing as well, though. I mean, that's half the thing. I think most of the battle with any script is if the writing is there, and I really always felt the writing was always so there that I never had much, and then it was just easy for me to kind of be the Kate that I created, so. And
we had the lovely Kevin McCahern, who was also on the sidelines there. We had great comedians in the film. So
a lot. You had John Calleary and Peter McGann.
It was they were great, and but Kevin as well was, but I think generally as well, you just wanted to kind of, your own process very often is to stay with what you think it needs to be, and then to give it. And I think you did that with the stand-up as well. You go into, and I mean, every actor has a different way of approaching the role. But I think you very much did that with all aspects of it.
Yeah, I think my process definitely on set is mess loads and talk loads and not think about what I'm doing. And then when they say action, start, because I've already done all my work, and then just go into it. So that's I think I did it anyway with the stand-up.
Siobhán, would you have a similar process to that? And kind of hit like that, or would it be different?
Slightly different, I think. But it depends on the nature of the scene that we're working on.
Mm.
I think when it came to a lot of the hospital stuff, that for me required a little bit more, I suppose, just quiet and reflection, and we had that, and Gemma-Leah wasn't messing too much before those scenes.
I was staying away. Well, yeah, no, well, I know, but it's a process in the sense that if I think too much about, because I've already done so much work, so it's like, I just find creative atmospheres on set the best for me creatively is when everyone's kind of happy, there's no stress. And then, you know, when they say action, then I go into my character and do what I'm thinking. And then that's, you know, that's just the way I do it, because I think I overthink it then, you know, if you have a big thing coming up and then you start thinking about your lines and what you're doing, and it just stops what I'm doing. So I think I kind of distract myself and then go and try and see if it works, you know, that's what you can do.
That's really interesting. Like, because always when we do these ones, it's fascinating to hear what different actors who like have to stay in it for a while beforehand and after, and then others who are like, I can't be doing that. And like, it's just fascinating to see like what works for you.
Yeah, I think when I cry, I suppose sometimes I have to stay more, like I listen to a lot of music when I cry, but I make a book for every character that I do. So I'll have just this whole book of Kate, like I still have it. I have all the characters in books. So I'll have it always, and I get really attached to my book as well. I'm like, where's my book? You know, before scenes and stuff. I'm like, I need to be, sometimes because you can go to the scene and then look at all my notes and everything that I'm thinking, and, you know, all pictures that I have. And so, yeah, so I mean, obviously I take it very seriously, but yeah, I mess in the sense that I distract myself so much that I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. So that then all I'm doing, hopefully in the process, is reacting and listening to what the other person is doing and really being very in it, you know, and instead of thinking, sometimes you can just go crazy with thinking. Sometimes if you really think about what you're doing, when you have loads of cameras and how many people on set looking at you, it really takes you away from being the person that you're trying to act as, you know, like, so, yeah.
I have no idea how anyone acts anyway. And like what you're saying there, like I'd always be thinking, what is my face doing? Because
Yeah, like,
I apparently have resting catastrophe face. So people just keep coming up going like, what's happened? I'm like, no, not everything's fine. So like, I'd be very wary of that. So I don't know how.
What's
like,
your hand doing? Like, what is your hand? It is sometimes people are like, what is my hand doing? You're like, I've never even thought of that before. But a camera goes on you and you're like, what am I, you know what I mean? So anything to distract away from those thoughts and just kind of only be in the character, that's what I do. So
I do think the 5 women at the center of the film, though, on the shoot, like you guys, you two, and then Barbara and Devereux and Karen, like, I mean, we did need to create this sense of this connection between these women, but I felt like the 5 of you really had that as well very quickly, just like, you know, so that again, you know, when you're casting, again, we don't have time to do a huge amount of rehearsals or get to know. So that was such a pleasure to see that happen. I mean, I felt that on the set, that there was a real supportive, you know, it felt like all 5 and all the other actors, but in particular, you guys were all kind of creating a space to help each other, you know, find the roles and the moments that you were looking for with me.
Actually, on that, just the other characters, like as well, like and you're saying Barbara, Devereux and Karen there, they're all fantastic. Like, how did you go about casting them? Because, and before that even, I think the construction of the group of women, they're all very different, but none of them feel like a caricature, or she's this type of person or she's that type of person. They all felt like quite real and authentic. I just wonder if yourself and Jean could talk a little bit about like fleshing out that support group. Jean, maybe if you want to hop in on that.
Well, the invention of the women, you know, that took quite a while to get them right. Kate, as a character, was pretty disconnected from the world. And if you think about her getting cancer, the cancer diagnosis was like, it should have been the great obstacle to her life, but it's the gift, because it forced her to interact with people. She didn't have any friends. She didn't communicate with people. She was you know, she suffered from a terrible sense of shame and insecurity and lack of self-worth. So she was forced into this situation where she had to connect with all these women, and she would never have done it willingly. So that was a great gift for her, the cancer. This is what made her, when she worked her way through that situation, she learned how to live. The women, we wanted to give a diverse range of women from various social backgrounds and ages, and I think we did, and Ruth cast them brilliantly.
Yeah, and I think we were also thinking, Jean, about what aspects of the women's character was going to erode Kate's defenses. So like Karen Egan, like Fiona, was going to literally kill her with positivity and kindness, and she wasn't going to ever, you know, back away from that. Tracy was going to come in like a wrecking ball, you know, and not take her bullshit. And also Tracy is so fighting for her life. That's going to have a huge power. And like Dervla's character, you know, has that kind of counseling kind of vibe, doesn't it? Like she was the listener and she has kind of the wisdom, and there's a stillness to her. And Barbara is this mother that never was there. So there are all these aspects of love that affect her, are all designed to come to bit by bit break down her defenses.
Yeah, they all brought specific gifts to Kate, to, as Ruth said, to break down her defenses and to open her heart.
I thought of it like that, but that is fascinating that they all had like a very specific role, but it never came across that they were that role. They all seemed like, you know, the three of them and Tracy, like very real.
Yeah, that's because it was brilliantly written
and performed.
And performed, of course.
No, absolutely, it was like, I mean, it really was. And I just want to turn back to Gemma-Leah and Tracy on that as well. Like Tracy, or sorry, not Tracy, Siobhán. See, that's how well it was. Siobhán, you'd mentioned as well about those scenes in the hospital stuff that you'd had like more of a stillness for that. But just in terms of the cancer kind of part of the role as well for both of you, did you do much research yourself, or did you find it was all on the page as you were given it? Maybe Siobhán, will start with you.
No, I definitely did do quite a lot of research. I had some very kind and sharing people in my life that I could approach and have those conversations with, but I also found specifically what I wanted to learn more about was what it was like to be so sick and so young. So I don't know, I think Gemma-Leah and I, we spoke about this, a podcast called You, Me and the Big C, which is a group of women in and around our age who are all going through various different types of cancers and at different stages. So kind of resources like that I used a lot, because I specifically, obviously we all wanted to learn, and we had conversations on set about like kind of like I suppose the nitty gritty, like what does the cold cap do, and what does it feel like, what does chemo feel like, and the kind of basics. But for Tracy in particular, what I wanted to learn was I wanted to hear what it felt like to be so young and so sick. So that was kind of, I suppose, the aspect of Tracy's cancer that I focused on. Okay.
Because she is quite indefatigable in so many ways, like, and she is like the really most positive oil and quite like vibrant and constantly talking about Mickeys and stuff. Like she's just she's a brilliant kind of character, like with that kind of youthful energy still, like unwaning in a lot of ways.
Yeah, to be still so youthful and to have so much fight left in you, but to have this this disease, that's kind of that contradiction and to figure out, to learn that you still can have both. You can have those moments of energy and vitality while still having, those down days. And yeah,
the more thing about it, she's a perfect counterpoint as well. Like as you said, she had so much fight in her, and like whereas Kate starts off without that, and it kind of transfers almost. Gemma-Leah, on that as well, did you similarly do a bit of research into the cancer side of the role beforehand, and how did you approach that?
Yeah, same. I mean, the Big C definitely was something I listened to a lot. There's so much of that, and sadly, while people have been making the podcast, they've passed away as well. So it was like, and I've watched a lot of documentaries and talked to a lot of people as well. So I mean, I love research. I think it's kind of, creating the character and the research is one of my favorite parts of the thing, but yeah, and I think, to be honest, I stayed in it so long. I mean, I got the part and then I kind of threw myself into it, and I was doing it for so long, and then it very much stayed with me as well afterwards. I was so angry because there was so much as well about Kate. There's so much of the cancer, and there's obviously also so much about the mental health aspect of her, that she gets this cancer diagnosis, and of course it's a gift, but at the same time it's also her ticket out of here. She's like, okay, she's just not well, and she doesn't want to be on this earth, and it's kind of, to her, it's like, this is me, not, I can leave this earth and not feel guilty, if you get what I'm saying. And then it's that journey that brings, and as Ruth said, breaks her heart open, meeting Tracy and all the women. but yeah, I think it definitely, she really got into my skin, because I'm in every scene as well. And I think it was just a lot. It was a lot. And she was so angry. I was really angry for like 2-3 weeks after filming, and I didn't really understand why. And then it was like, oh, and then I kind of finally let her go. There's such an anger in her. So yeah, there's a lot of
really interesting you mentioned the mental health aspect of it, because what reminded me of when she's cycling back from the diagnosis is the documentary, his name escapes me now, but it was about a musician, and he's quite a misanthropic, depressed character himself in real life. And with the day he was told he was dying of cancer, he said it was the first time I knew certainty on something, and it was a huge relief for me, almost. Like he said, like I knew, you know, something that was my way out. Like, and he ended up surviving and having a whole different lease of life. But I could see that, like, in that moment, and that kind of thing with her, I thought was really beautiful. We have to talk about the hair.
hair.
Like, I mean, I'm sure loads of people tell you it's incredibly brave and all that and stuff as well, and it is. Like, but it's how was that process for you? Like, it's obviously like something people have to go through in a different way when they have cancer. But was that always on the cards for the character and for you, or was there ever thoughts of just kind of doing it with like a cap or something?
No, I think it was always, I mean, there was talks obviously, but it was pretty much always on the cards, because I think when you're using a cap, obviously, as everyone knows, there's only certain angles you can use. There's only, so, you know, it's like, it becomes quite hard to shoot. And I am bald for a lot of it. So yeah, I don't know, we shaved my head on the second day of filming, because I think Ruth wanted me to kind of live in Kate for the first day. So actually the first thing I shot on the film was the opening of the film, and I had a wig, like, 'cause I've blonde wig, then I had like my fake hair, because there was a wig made specifically by, you know, Louise Mailer and you know, her wig specialist made this other wig that was like my real hair, if you get what I'm saying, like in it, my real hair was over my own hair. So like 3 things on. And then the next day, yeah, we shaved it off. And then from then on, I was kind of wearing like this real hair that was like a wig. So and taking it on and off and putting on many different wigs. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I love my job so much, and I'm very committed to doing I want to do everything, you know what I mean? So shaving my head, to me, everyone says it's brave, but it's, you know, it's not real as well. You know, people are actually dealing with this on a day in, day out real basis, where they're losing, you know, and to be able to depict that story, and hopefully it touches people in a certain way, that's kind of great. You know, I don't know. And it was incredibly liberating. I have a huge thing about, as a woman, the way you look and your hair says so much and all these things. And there's something about just taking everything off you, and you are who you are, you know, the kind of way. So I find it incredibly liberating as a woman, actually. But I also think as well, for me, shaving my head, I think that's why it helped me as well, because I was really in Kate. And I think as well, then even after filming, obviously my hair didn't grow back for ages, you know, so I was still a shaved head for ages, you know, so it really stayed with me, I have to say. So yeah,
I would do it the day we filmed, Gemma-Leah, like the day we filmed, like I think that was incredibly moving, because even though you were acting as if you were losing your hair, I think I certainly felt, and I felt you did, a huge empathy for everybody who had to go through that. Okay. So the reality of that moment where you're taking a raise, you know, and you know, you're taking off, like, it was, you know, I felt you're upset, and I felt upset, you know, so.
I mean, yeah, like I definitely, I was upset, but I was upset because I was in Kate's, you know, like and even my hand was shaking from when I was shaving my head, you know, it's a big thing to do, but but I really did help, I have to say, in the whole thing as well, you know, it really got us to tell the story the way we wanted to. So I'm really glad I did it, and I'd do it again, you know, I would do it again if the right thing came along, you know, so yeah.
Fantastic. And Siobhán, for you, did you get rid of your hair as well, or was that different? Because I know Tracy wears like a cap most of, or like a hat most of the time. So
yeah, so Tracy, I was wearing a bald cap, which, because I think initially we had planned that Tracy was kind of mostly going to be wearing hats, and then Madonna Bambino, one of our amazing hair and makeup team, did such a good bald cap on me that we actually ended up using the bald cap quite a bit. But as Gemma-Leah said, it did, you know, if there were then restrictions with certain angles, and you know, so for obviously for, you know, Gemma-Leah, she's bald for so much of the film, like I you know, it just probably wouldn't have been possible with our like time. And but
well, it was an incredibly good one, as you can see by me asking the question, like, wait, didn't you? I wasn't sure, like.
We did a wonderful job, but we were, I mean, there was things like in the lake and stuff. We were like, is this going to be waterproof? And I was like, I think my bowl cap is filling up with water. But for the moment,
You mentioned Louise Moyler there as well, Gemma-Leah, on the wigs like Kate had to wear, and they're incredibly vibrant. It's so central to like the look of the film, but also like I suppose a lot of the emotional warmth of it as well. Ruth, with like you mentioned before when we were talking about like the storytelling through the wigs a little bit, and you may have driven Louise slightly mad in the process of that.
Definitely,
Into that.
Yeah, no, it was a logistical nightmare for Louise, and she was amazing. She you know, but we had a lot of, because you're also, there's the schedule, and then there's where Kate is in her chemo and where her baldness is. And then also how to use the wigs, because this is a character who would have costumes and wigs, and also it's part of the irreverence. So, but even sometimes, you know, there's split wigs with different colors, and there's, you know, even the white wig she's wearing when she in the midpoint, and there's like, you're trying to assign a use to the color as well. And the pink and the blue is like, I often think with the film, there's this very strong masculine and feminine worlds. Like it's a feminine world of breast cancer in the hospital, and the masculine world of the comedy club. And, you know, and she's, when we meet her, she doesn't really have female friends or connections. So there's this kind of shift as well for her into this world of feeling, and into this very feminine world. So you're trying to use everything in the storytelling. You know, I mean, Jean had come up with that line about her being locked behind glass, that feeling that Kate talks about at one point. And so myself and JJ Rolfe and Mark Kelly as well, you're kind of looking all the time for how can we use glass, and, you know, as a visual storytelling way of helping create that sense of being locked behind, away from the world. Or water, you know, the sea is this, obviously the you know, you're looking at even the little goldfish in the bowl, everything is like water, glass, where is it? So, you know, there's all these ways that you try with the budget that you have, you know, and obviously so it was incredible talented team with JJ and his team and Mark, and they're doing everything they can to tell this with, like, whether it's the wigs with Louise, or whether it's the art direction or the cinematography, or you're just constantly going, how can we evoke these moments, these feelings through.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned both JJ Rolfe, because the cinematography is gorgeous in it, and the art direction as well, but also the fish is one of my favorite things in it, how it's like Kate's almost like internal Greek chorus, and the little dialogues they have back and forth. Where did that come from initially? Because I just thought that worked so well.
The fish actually had a name. Did it?
Brendan. I had Brendan until recently. Brendan just disappeared recently. I inherited Brendan after the shoot.
He ran away with Betty. We had a little plot around the goldfish. Brendan, the goldfish. Well, Brendan was symbolic of her life, really. Brendan was going around in circles, getting nowhere.
And was a significant other as well. You know, with a
Yeah. So he was just like Kate, going around in circles, getting nowhere, and behind glass all the time, as she was. And at some point in one of the scripts, we had a happy ending for Brendan, and we introduced Betty, the goldfish, to the bowl. But we thought that might be a bit schmaltzy, so we left him single.
We left him on his own.
No, I just had to ask that because I just thought it was a lovely series of beats in it. Speaking of another beat, we haven't spoken about Tom Vaughan Lawler's character yet. Tom sadly couldn't join us today, but I was just saying it's terrific to see him in a role like this, where he's, I suppose, the pharmacist / kind of a love interest / a survivor of his wife died of cancer, and he's a beautiful character and very sensitive, and it's interesting to see Tom Vaughan Lawler play that. But there's a scene with him and Kate where they hook up, and it's one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen in a very long time. And Gemma-Leah, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that scene where, like, it's kind of hard to talk about even, but it was just so beautifully done. But I imagine it must have been quite challenging as an actress.
In what way? I mean, in what way?
Just the emotional depth of it, like when he's there together and he's kind of reacting to, like, I suppose, you know, the loss of, in a weird way, the loss of his wife's breast in that moment, and it's very obvious to her, like, it's, yeah,
it was you know, it's funny, I've worked with Tom before in Citizen Lane, and I was the sister in that, and then in this we were, you know, playing kind of potential kind of lovers, and I think there's a real beautiful build with their relationship. You know, they meet, she's kind of, you know, it's just, and then when you get to that point, you see there's a part of Kate that actually is looking for this intimacy that she seems very unable to do, and they're very much pushing against each other, you know. So I mean, filming it was great. I mean, Tom's just such a gentleman, really just such a gentleman to work with, and we were in this tiny room, and it was all done, you know, it was done quite quickly, to be fair, but yeah, I think I know only that my feeling from it when I finished filming, you know, when I have to walk away, is that I know Kate personally feels very rejected, you know, but then he's, you know, his whole thing, I mean, a whole different thing going on with him, that he's just so upset, and it's really, you know, he's incapable of trying to connect with her as well, because he's still so with his wife, you know, so it's just very sad for both of them, really, you know. It's kind of a, you know,
it's a really beautiful scene, really.
Thank
is
you so much. Thank you. I'm really glad that you said that.
Very affecting, I have to say. And it just reminds me of something else as well, when Siobhán's character finally passes away, and Kate is there. It's another kind of really beautiful scene. And I'll talk to Siobhán in a second just about that scene, but Ruth, there's something my wife noticed actually when we were watching about, you cut to the window in the edit when she dies, and it's the old Irish thing, I suppose, of leaving the window open. I just thought that was really beautiful kind of signifier, like a short little cutaway. Was that something kind of came up with as you were shooting, or in the editor, was that always kind of in there?
That actually happened the day of the shoot, because it was a really poignant shoot, really. I mean, I had lost my sister and my friend, and I took myself and Gemma-Leah and Siobhán just went into a room beforehand, and I was telling them about being with that moment, and we were just sitting in that moment of loss, really. And I felt there was a really kind of beautiful energy around it. And I actually thought as well, you forget with the film crew, there's, you know, you might go, oh, there's the sound person, or there's the art, but everybody has their own experience of grief and loss. And I actually felt a kind of sense of the crew collectively tuning into that moment. And but I remember saying to JJ, oh, like the net curtain that Mark had put, or that was there, is just had this flimsy, and just to, you know, I had been with somebody before where my instinct had been to open the window when they were dying, and you don't, you know, it's very visceral, isn't it? It's a real, so and everybody understands that image, so it wasn't. It just kind of came up, and sometimes things present themselves like that, and they go, oh, it's part of the story. It's the pulse of the thing again, you know. So
I just found that really beautiful, because when my grandmother died, I was with her, and straight over, I just opened the window, like, and I wouldn't be the overly spiritual type of person, but it was just in my muscle memory in some way, and it was, I just felt that really quite resonant. Siobhán, how was shooting that scene for you? Like, as I mentioned, obviously there's like a personal resonance for her, like, but I imagine, like, you know, playing a character like Tracy, who is finally going, must mean, like, how do you prepare for that?
I don't really know how you, like, as I said, like there's the stuff that you can, the kind of mechanics of it. Like, I remember we had conversations about, you know, when someone dies, their last breath isn't an in breath, it's an out breath, and it just, like, the small little mechanics that you're like, they're the kind of maybe things that you hook on, and then in between that is just, I don't know, my feeling with Tracy was that, I mean, she lived to the fullest, and there has to be some sort of not resignation, but like an acceptance at that point. And in terms of prep, right beforehand, as Ruth was saying, that we kind of did, the three of us had that chat and had that time and space, which I was so appreciative of, and I think really helped to create that atmosphere. And Ruth was really generous in sharing her stories and her experience, and also, as you were saying as well, everybody on the day, everybody who was on set that day was extremely respectful, and I think, perhaps we're sitting in their own kind of experiences and thoughts. So yeah, I don't know. There's when it comes to, I think, prepping for dying, there's only so much you can do, and then on the day, then you just have to trust that, like, the work that you've done up until this point, and you know the character, and just.
But you say a beautiful thing there as well. You say I've had a bright past, and it kind of it's in a way where this title is like, that's a really important tiny little thing that you say, but it's actually, you know, when she's apologizing about not having your bright future, and I mean that like is such a big thing for that character, I think, wasn't it?
Totally. And also, like, that in those moments, a lot of her concern is to make sure that Kate's okay, and to send her off on her way to finish her journey. And I think that was kind of just really like epitomizes Tracy, and yeah.
It really is like a beautiful scene, and like Kate's reaction to it then, which I alluded to earlier, when she cycles off like to the sea, as you said, Ruth, back to that, like it's very much to me it seemed anyway, maybe I'm overthinking it, like in dialogue with the earlier scene of her on the bike leaving the hospital, where she's like, this is grand, this is fine, and then she's bloody angry, and she's furious about this loss, and has to go to the water again. And it was very convincing. I really hope you didn't put Gemma-Leah off the pier on the bike, but it looked really brilliant. And like Gemma-Leah, I imagine like just cycling like that with like on top of that emotion you're trying or conveying must have been quite difficult, or was it like something you've experienced before?
I wasn't allowed to obviously throw myself and cycle myself off.
So to clarify, yeah.
But just to clarify, no Gemma-Leah Devereux were hurt in the making of this project. But I mean, yeah, I would love to do it. Like, I mean, because you're, you know, I'm so angry at that stage. You know, Kate is just you know, even this person that she's finally connected to, you know, I just think there's just so much anger, and that really is the explosion of anger, you know. She's just sick of it. She wants out. She's just like, you know, but no, we had a brilliant stunt person who did it. It was amazing.
It's a great sequence as well, and it's very cathartic. And then where Kate is just floating in the water, kind of.
And Cullen Campbell, who edited the film, I mean, I think what he did with well, obviously with the whole film, but also that scene that's such a tricky scene, because the whole film is leading up to that moment, and it's wordless, but it's deeply emotional. And between Stephen Rennick's score, I think, and Cullen, you know, and like Frank Delaney, who did sound design, and like it's just that is the moment. You're trying to earn that moment for the whole film, and you either, you know, so it is like, it's funny, isn't it? Because between performance and sound, and, you know, we had Ken, the underwater cinematographer, who did, like, they're just those elements that have to come together. That's what I mean by, you think, you know, it's so collective for a single moment that the film hinges on to work. It's like, it's amazing. And like, anyway,
could I just mention something about Tracy's death? Tracy wasn't actually meant to die. In the earlier drafts, we had dropped a lot of hints that Roisin didn't have long to go, and she was taking pills, and, you know, we were leading people up to think that Roisin was probably going to die before the film ended. And then myself and Ruth sat down one day and we were going, yes, that would be sad, but the real relationship is with Kate and Tracy. And also, you know, from a practical point of view, cancer moves very slowly in old people, but in younger people, it progresses much more quickly. So logically, we decided that we would kill Tracy.
Well,
sorry, not Tracy.
It was emotionally devastating, so thank you for that.
And it had much more impact emotionally. Tracy's death had more emotional impact.
And it was the right call again, like you got to the place, the pulse of the story needed to be. Sorry, I'm just conscious we're kind of running out of time. We have a few questions in. You haven't sent them in, but there's one here from Kira Bryant. He says, the film feels incredibly meaningful and incredibly authentic, like not just to someone watching, but with the people involved. How important do you think this is in having female writers, director, and a female-led cast in terms of conveying this? So maybe Ruth, we could go to you on that. Thank you, Kira, for your question.
Well, thank you for the observations, but the only reason I think it's a female story in terms of its breast cancer, but that, like, men who could be telling a story about well, it's difficult, isn't it, when you go into men or women or female. I think the story is a very emotional story, and it's a very female story. So obviously it's essential to have female storytellers. But I think that you can go across the board. That's one of the things I've been saying that I think is so important, is various perspectives are really needed in story. Filmmaking is such a powerful medium and such a way of us making sense of the world that it needs diverse perspectives. But each perspective then for authenticity needs to be probably, those stories need to be told by the people who are experiencing them. So in this case, this is, Irish women. But if it's, African men telling a story about something, then if I was an Irish woman telling that story, I wouldn't have authenticity. So I guess that it's to be true to the pulse of the story, and who are the best people to tell that story, and to support that story, because you have the tellers and the supporters, anyway, yeah.
That's very well answered. We have another question here from Brian Harty, which I suppose goes back to the pulse of the story as well, and leaving space for that, where he asked, was there room with the actors for improvising, or was it a tight process due to time or your own vision, Ruth? Or how do you feel about actors improvising in general? I was go to Ruth first to see on this set, was there much improvising, or with the cast?
There wasn't a lot, but I love improvisation. But first and foremost, I wanted to shoot the script. And then we were on a really tight, we moved very fast. We had a lot of locations. DCU supported us a lot. We were able to shoot 17 locations or something out there, which made it doable, because the whole film had a lot of, otherwise would have had too many unit moves. So speed, like being able to shoot fast, meant that, that dictated a lot.
And Gemma-Leah and Siobhán, yourselves, how did you feel about being able to kind of put your own spin on little moments like that? Obviously you had to shoot the script first, but how's that process for you, Gemma-Leah?
Yeah, there wasn't really any improvisation. I'm sure there was maybe a bit, but not really. The script was so good, so I think we were always just trying to stick to the lines and do what we could with it. So yeah, and I think Ruth is great, to work with Ruth. She's so open. She knows, gush about you all the time, Ruth, but I do really, you're such a brilliant actress director. You're not saying go do this and go do this. She always let us feel out the scene, and then kind of go, okay, and we would talk about it. And it's a real collaborative process, which is the best kind of process, because the whole point of an actor is that they know what they're doing. The whole point of a director is they know what they're doing, and together, that's when you get the dynamite, so there was so much of that on the set. Clearly,
it definitely comes across. Guys, sorry, we're after running out of time there, and I could literally talk to you about this beautiful film you've made for another 2 hours easily. I just want to say to all four of you, congratulations again on such a really affecting and beautiful and meaningful film. Really did hit me very hard, and in a very, very good way. It was life affirming more than anything else. It was beautiful. And
thank you.
Ruth, people will be able to see this, I believe, if they missed it in the cinema and aren't members able to view and vote on it, they will be able to see it sometime in the summer. We hope on the
spring, hopefully it will be online. We're talking to different platforms, but yeah, definitely online this spring.
Well, please let us know when that happens, because I'd very much like as many people to see this as possible. It's a really terrific film. We'll be back again tomorrow with another one of these screen discussions. We'll be talking to the team behind Black Medicine, which is director Cullen Eastwood. Got actors in Tony Campbell-Hughes, Orla Brady, John Connors. I think the composer James Everett as well. So please do tune in for that. And this will be available for our members from next week on the IFTA website as well. But for now, keep an eye on for more of these events. But for now, just thank you so much to Jean, Ruth, Gemma-Leah, and Siobhán, who's not Tracy. I realise that now. But thank you all so much for your time and for the film. It's been really, really wonderful to talk to you. And thank you so much.